I'm just drinking tea.
Drinking tea. That's a good way to go. Welcome to the show, guys. How are we both?
We're good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, good. Nice to be on my first podcast.
Yes, I was just saying, so Im is quite the podcast queen with her own podcast, Good Mourning, and her husband Ben is here joining us as well and has never been on a podcast before. I feel so privileged. Im, how did you make this happen?
Well, I was going to say it could go either way, so we'll see. I twisted his arm a bit, but no, he's excited.
No, I love it. Love it. All right, guys. So just for those listening, a bit of background on our beautiful guest today. So we've got Imogen. She's the podcast host, as I mentioned, of Good Mourning, a very well-known podcast in the Australian podcast, I guess, library. It's more specific around grief and handling grief. Not only does she have her own podcast, but she's also an author. So she and her co-host, Sal, have written the book Good Mourning, Honest Conversations about Grief and Loss, which I feel like is no easy feat. So well done, girl. She's also a speaker and a grief advocate. And we're also joined, as I mentioned, by her hubby, Ben, a business owner and system developer. So guys, as you would know, this podcast is all about sharing our experiences as parents, being super raw and honest about our grievances. And also, as much as we absolutely love our delightful cherubs, the whole point of the podcast is to be real about, some of the challenges that we feel we're experiencing on the daily so that others can sort of feel less alone in those challenges as well. I'm going to start with you, Ben, because I do notice a bit of an accent. Tell me, how did you meet our gorgeous Im? Talk us through it.
Well, most people at home think I'm Aussie now, so they seem to think I'm saying Aussie words. But I was basically flicking through Tinder in London. So I was actually at a meeting in London Bridge, for one of our clients, and got a little bit bored of me and started swiping yes to every girl. No, I'm joking. Just started swiping. Obviously,
here we go.
In the middle of the meeting, and then I matched with Immi on Tinder, and then it was kind of it just went really quickly. We matched, started talking, and then Immi was after my number within sort of a day or so. So
can we just preface this entire conversation with Ben is a sarcastic person, and the majority of what he's going to say today is not verbatim. So I just need to put that out there. But we did meet on Tinder.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. So wait, you were living in London then at the time as well, Im, were you? Okay,
yeah,
right.
I went over there with our friend Elle. We've got a mutual friend, Elle, and I went over there to do the whole working visa thing, and I ended up staying for the whole 2 years. But we actually met in my first week that I was there, so I didn't muck about.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And when did babies come in the picture for you guys? Oh, baby, I should say, sorry.
So we met in, 2015? No, 2015?
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah, 2015, I think. And then we ended up having a baby in 2019. So, we've been together for a little while. We
Something
had
you discussed prior, or like had you sort of, talked about wanting children?
Well, it's funny because Ben comes from a really big family. So children was like having a family was always going to happen for him. But I, on the other hand, never really identified as a very maternal person and was kind of afraid at the idea of having kids. So we had talked about it, and I knew going into a relationship with Ben, having a family was going to be a non-negotiable. So I was open to it, but we hadn't necessarily planned it, and it was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah. You were trying to, we was in New Zealand, weren't we? And you felt ill when we were skiing.
Yeah.
And then she was like, and then we come back and then we had our birthday, and then you were thinking, oh, maybe I am pregnant, but I'm going to drink.
Yeah, I'll find out tomorrow after our birthday party. That's terrible.
Anyway. And then,
I'll deal with that tomorrow.
Yeah, and then after that you found out you were pregnant.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so great. And so at that point, were you guys living back in Oz?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. So I'm curious from each of you, like when you became parents, is it what you expected? Tell me.
No. I mean, Emmy's got zero, well, hardly any experience with kids, really, because she's not been around kids like babies that much.
Yeah.
I've got like four siblings, and they've all had kids, and my mum was always looking after children, and
Yeah.
obviously I had younger sisters and that, so I kind of had an idea of what parenting looked like, but it's still a complete shock. Like every child's different. I don't think you can prepare for it, but yeah, I was in complete shock. Even from the birth through to those early newborn
I
sort of
think we
years.
should tell people the story of how you ended up in hospital when I gave birth.
Yeah, well,
Stop.
yeah,
What
I
happened?
don't want to. Well, I'm better. I'm better at being in the situation, being the person observing it. So if it was me giving birth, weirdly, I think I would have been in a better frame of mind. But and the fact that she was highly dosed up on morphine and stuff. The birth was long, very traumatic. It was 24 hours pretty much in labour, and then sort of an hour of pushing. So then she got rushed in for a C-section, and yeah, I think I could overhear everything that the surgeons and everything were saying, and whereas Immi was just sort of vibrating on the bed. I don't know what it was. The epidural had affected her, and she was sort of just continuously shaking. So we're already tired, and then they basically pulled this baby out, and I'm still in shock, really. Didn't know what to think, and it was. So when I went off with the baby, I could see Immi just like back on the bed, still shaking and looking quite concerned, and I think they'd given her morphine and all that. So I spent a bit of time with Layla, went back with you, and yeah, she just didn't look like she was coping very well. So I was actually really concerned about Immi more than obviously Layla, because I knew she was okay. And obviously you haven't quite got that bond with the baby yet, so it was obviously I was still very worried about Immi. And then so then I think my issue then was that Layla never slept. Like I heard that when a baby's born, they sleep really well for a day after and all that sort of stuff, and that's what we were told. Layla didn't sleep, and she didn't sleep for more than 2 hours. So I stayed in the hospital with Immi for three days, and I was up with the baby because she had a C-section, so she couldn't carry the baby. So I think because I was there, the midwives put all the pressure on me to help and do things, where I should have probably gone home because I was already really tired. So I was getting woken up continuously. I don't think I had more than 6 hours sleep in 3 days.
You had a plastic mattress
I was
on the
just
floor,
on the floor
and no food. Like the hospital didn't offer him any
me.
food.
What?
I had no food. They didn't give me any drink or anything. Like I was just eating bits of Immi's food that she hadn't eaten.
Jesus.
And then I was getting coffee, so I was loading myself up with coffee as well. So anyway, I ended up feeling really I woke up again because the midwife walked in, and I woke up feeling really sick, like just dizzy and stuff. And I said, I don't feel good. And they were like, oh, we can't do anything. You have to walk yourself down to A&E. I was like, okay. So I walked myself down to A&E, and they basically checked my blood pressure, and it was like sky high. It was hypertension. I think it was really, really high. So they basically gave me some fluids and just sat me down and basically waited for me to sort of calm down a bit. But I think it was just the sheer shock of everything, and then not eating, not drinking, not sleeping, and I should have just gone home. And then that night I went home because I think England were playing, maybe with Chris, who was the stepdad, when I watched football. And then the next day I was okay and I could help, So I think if I should have probably have gone home a bit earlier, because she would have been looked after by the midwives. But that,
and there's just not a lot of care for the dads in that situation. Like they're just a bit of an afterthought, and the mum is just the one getting looked after, which I think is not great.
I can't believe they didn't even offer food. Like, isn't that a common basic No, wow, that's so crazy. So it's quite of a whirlwind, obviously, in those early days. And you said, if Layla didn't sleep much either, like God, that would send anyone crazy. Like, what are some of the difficulties that you felt both of you experience, in those early days? I guess even individually, like, would you say the sleep deprivation was one of the hardest things, or what do you both think?
We've got quite a unique story. I think the sleep deprivation definitely got to both of us and was so difficult. And then, yeah, she just sort of was a really tough baby until about 6 months. And then we flew over to the UK to visit Ben's family because we've got none of them here as well. It was just my mum was a big support for us at the start. And then, yes, we went for a trip over to the UK to like let Layla meet the rest of her family. And then we came back. And then sadly, my mum took her own life and it just completely blew our world apart. So we not only had a baby, we'd lost my mum, our biggest support here in Australia. So it just threw us into the depths of hell, really. It was just such a horrific time. And like we're sitting here now and it's been, I think, 3 years since everything has happened. And I don't know how we're actually here to be able to tell this story because there were times where it was so heavy. I'm amazed that Ben and I made it through as a couple. Is one of the biggest things, I think, because we've kind of had all of the tests that a relationship could have in a very short period of time. And I don't think a lot of people would get through that. It was a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and for those listening, Em actually tells her story in one of our episodes. I think it was called Motherless Mum. So I'll put that in the episode notes for people to listen to. It's such a completely tragic story. But I guess, to your point, like as a couple, like I'm curious, Ben, like, what is that like, when you see your partner struggling so severely and you have a newborn on top of that? Like, what was that like for you?
It was it's a bit of a blur, but it was pretty insane. Like Layla was, as Immi said, was really, really hard. She didn't sleep anyway. We were already really tired. I think she had hand, foot, and mouth as well when it all happened as well. So Layla was really sick.
We were moving house.
We were moving house as well, and literally putting boxes in the house when it happened. And, it was just. I think we just all in deep shock. And all I wanted to do was ring my mum and that, but it was late at night in the UK. So I ended up getting through to my sister and she was like, what's going on? Panicking. So I think it was really hard because not only did all that happen, obviously Immi was really badly impacted, which meant she was almost like a vegetable, was the only way, or a zombie that I could sort of explain it. She was still really good as a mum. And I think Layla sort of helped that because she had to do Layla, she had to look after Layla. She had no choice. But I just remember just her being sort of a vegetable in a way. Just like we went to Bunnings and to get some stuff, and she just literally followed behind me and just was just in this complete shock. And it was really hard for me as well because I had a really good relationship with obviously his mum, and for us it's the Layla's other grandmas in the UK. So it would have been great to have a grandma that was around that Layla could have that relationship with. So that was really, really hard. And then I guess it's just picking up the everyday things as well. Because Immi, through her grief, she's found it really hard emotionally and stuff like that, but she's unable to sort of do the normal things like, still, do, I don't know, sort bills out, whatever it is, or arrange things. So I found that I had to do that. And also, she was unable to, she wasn't working anyway. So I was obviously doing I was working a lot. I had to take on more work to ensure that, that we could financially sort of float. Because it's not, as you know, Sydney in general isn't cheap. And having a child, and she was in daycare at the time as well, I think. And so there was a lot to pay for. So for me, I was very tired. I was finding it very hard. Trying to help Immi emotionally as well, because I think Immi relied on me a lot emotionally. So I got sometimes, as I don't know how to put it, but sometimes it's like kind of, this is sort of the wrong time. Like I've got things, we need to, there's things we got to do to survive. And I don't have this moment to just jump and help you with your like the way you're feeling. But
Mm.
I had to, obviously, because it's I think partners rely on their partner a lot to get a lot of reassurance and stuff when they're grieving, or when things happen, and it's actually quite hard, especially when you're picking up lots of other roles. So you
Mm.
did get it in other areas, with friends and stuff, and you know,
Yeah.
and to be fair, all of Emmy's friends, family were amazing. They came and they helped. They, you know, I didn't know where half of my stuff was because they unpacked all our boxes and put it in. So for about 6 months, I'm still trying to find my clothes and that. But they were bringing food and stuff like that. So I think
Yeah.
that's what the great thing was. People, I feel like people were doing things and coming over and help clean and all that, and that stuff's actually a great help, rather than, you know, maybe just sending some flowers, which is also nice, but actually doing
Yeah.
things that can sort of help take the pressure off, I think was.
Yeah, but I do
Um,
think that there comes a point when that support drops away,
Mm.
not long after the funeral, and
Yeah.
we were sort of just left to our own devices, and it was also COVID,
mm,
and Ben was just juggling
yeah,
work.
yeah,
We had Layla at home full time. She went to daycare when she was 1, so we had her at home for the 3 months.
yeah.
And yeah, I did identify in hindsight that my relationship with my mum was kind of codependent. Like, I'd always rely on her for emotional support. Whenever anything went wrong, I'd call my mum, and we were really close, maybe in a little bit of an unhealthy way. And so when she died, and I'm going through the biggest catastrophic thing in my life, and I don't have that person, my go to, I think everything kind of just fell back on Ben. So then he's the financial support, you know, he's doing all the practical things that I was unable to do. And then I'm now leaning on him for that emotional support as well. Like, it was, my expectations of him were just unrealistic. And I think that caused a lot of friction at times in our relationship. And perhaps we just didn't feel like we were, you know, each of us were being heard. And I felt like my needs weren't being met. And he was just feeling like the whole weight of the world was on his shoulders. So it was just a really difficult time. And I don't know how we got through it.
Yeah, it's
Honestly.
insane.
Early
Yeah.
parenting is like tough enough, let alone
Mm.
in those circumstances. When you found yourselves in a position where, like, a level of disagreement or something over something, right? Like, you know, Ben's feeling overwhelmed, you know, Im, you feel like you're not getting what you want in that moment, let's call it. I mean, I guess I'd love to understand, like, how do people fight and how do people resolve? So, like, is there certain things that you guys do? You're all looking a bit hesitant now. But, you
Yeah.
know,
No.
for others as well, like, tell me what's it like, and
Yeah.
how do you then resolve? Yeah.
Well, we are both Virgos. We're born like 4 days apart. We're
Yeah.
incredibly headstrong, really stubborn
Mm.
people.
Yeah.
So as you can imagine, when we're in arguing, we're both right, and we
Yeah.
both don't back down, and we both will just
Yeah,
keep on going.
but
Um,
I am always
whatever.
right.
But I think when I look back at those times where there were moments of, like, when we were disagreeing on things or arguing about things, like, I just remember my early grief, like, I was so angry. Like, I just was full of rage. And so our fights would be quite explosive. And I'd storm out of the house, and I'd just drive off, and I just wanted to get away. Like, I just wanted to run away from my life. And like, I felt so trapped, and at times, like, no one understood. And I guess I was stuck in a real victim mentality back then. Um, which I had to work through, you know, but I think, yeah, our fights weren't great, and we sort of really struggled with communication. And I think we still do struggle a little bit with communication, but we've got better at kind of just like
Dealing with it,
dealing with it and cooling it off. Like, back then, I think when everything was so heightened with the grief and the trauma, it was really hard. And then you've got a baby screaming, and like, it was really hard.
and because I was working from home as well, I
You
think
were working from
because
home too.
because of obviously what happened and then COVID, so
Yeah.
there was no getting away either. So
No
it was
break.
kind of
And in
like,
lockdown, we're stuck in each
yeah,
other's
and I didn't have,
company.
like, we weren't in a house where I had my separate office up. My office was kind of within the front room because it was in Sydney, like in Mascot. We just had this one level house, and it was just sort of big open plan. We had a couple of bedrooms, but it was just too hard to set up in there. So it was just in each other's hair as well. And I think you sometimes need that you need that separation a little bit,
Yeah.
just to
Cool off.
calm down and get out of each other's hair. And I think eventually we just sort of parked it. We got used to being able to just park it and walk away. And I also had a bit of obviously I was grieving as well, and like it's probably was probably the biggest loss that I've ever had, and that was someone that's not directly related to me. So in a way, it was kind of like I was feeling like I shouldn't be as affected by this as Immi, you know. So I should just be accepting of whatever she feels and whatever she wants to do, and just agree with her. And I did for a bit, but then after a while, it kind of got a bit grinding, and especially when you got a lot going on work wise. And my family again are in the UK, so if my family were here, they would have done all they could to help us. They were getting tickets to come over to help, but COVID stopped that as well. So we even some family did a pool and got us some money as well to help get the family over, and we couldn't even do that in the end because of COVID. So it was there's so many things all thrown in: COVID, grieving, a newborn, moving house.
What do you think is that? As you said, like that is an absolute cluster. You know what? Like of situations all in the one little incubator where you can't even really leave, right? So what do you think got you? Like, if you look back at it now, what got you guys through it? Like, was there any sort of fundamental things that you're like, or was it just one foot in front of the other every single day? Any lessons from that?
I think a lot of it was one foot in front of the other. I think something that I love about Ben is he's very family oriented. Like, that's it. Once he's got a family, that's it. I think it was always, it's a big value of his. And so there was really no giving up, and I think a lot of people would have given up and walked away. And like, I feel so grateful that he's still here with me today. Because it was a lot, and I was a lot, to deal with, and I take full responsibility of that. I don't think it's a normal situation for anyone to go through, but he stuck through it. And I think what also really helped is when we first met, we were just so drawn to each other. It was almost like we'd known each other our whole lives. Like, I think, without being too woo-woo, like, there's a soul connection there. Like, we went through, some stuff in the early stages of our relationship, which, tested us a lot, but we kept just coming back to it. It was almost like nothing could break us. And I think we just kept coming back to that, being like, we know how good this is. We know that there's nothing going to be greener on the other side. We know how we feel about each other and how much we mean to each other. Let's get through this. And I think another element for me is I come from a really broken home. So my parents divorced when I was 2. I never remember living with my biological dad. And then my mum remarried my stepdad, who I lived with for about 15 years. And then they split up. And then my mum ended up with a woman. So I came from a really complicated upbringing. So another thing for me is never wanting my child to go through that. So I will do anything that it takes for her to have a really secure and stable home, because it's something that I never had. And I think it's really important. So I think there's a few factors that come into play there as to what kept us going. Did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, no, I think, as you said, just thinking about the good times and how it all started out and how strong we were. I've also come from a family where we go through our issues and we sort them out and move on. Like, sometimes it can take 6 months, sometimes it can be a couple of weeks, but we don't just throw it away. And my mum and dad's relationship is very much like that. They've gone through a lot, in their life together. So, and there's probably times they could have gone, sod this, they've had 5 kids within 7 years, and they again, the financial strain of that, and so I think I get that from probably my family as well. And my family are very close in the UK. Like, they all live within sort of 2 miles of each other as well. So we've got a lot of family. So I think that kind of helps as well. But I think it is easy to give up. But you just got to.
Especially in this day and age, people will just seem a little bit more disposable, especially with online dating and things like, and that grass is greener mentality. But Yeah, I think we were
Oh,
just lucky that we had all these driving forces that stopped that from happening.
Mm.
and I think like the values, I mean, they always say like aligned values is everything, right? Because love
Mm.
is not enough. It never is enough. You need to
Mm.
have way more than love in a relationship to get you through times like that. You need to have the same
Mm.
values, the same sort of end goal. I mean, this is my belief at least. Like, you know, you can
Mm.
be in love with someone, but find situations like that too much and say, I love you, but I can't be in this anymore, right? But if your
Yeah.
values are
Mm.
so aligned, like you've got the family values and all of that, and you just never want to give up, that's what I reckon gets couples through. I'm curious. So let's say coming out of that time, and I can only imagine the last couple of years have not been easy just in general, but as it got a little bit more sort of day to day in the coming sort of years, and now how old's Layla, your little one?
She's 4.
Cool, yeah.
She four, yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, now you've navigated a few different stages of her life as well. How do you find, each other when it comes to the way which you parent, your parenting
Mm.
styles, and do they align or do they conflict?
Uh, I think our main sort of parenting styles, the most important ones, are
Yeah.
aligned. What we want for her, and how we want to bring her up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But we do have our we do have our differences, and mostly around. I think again, going back to that, I'm used to kids and screaming and crying. I'm used to all of that, right? Although when
Mm,
Layla was a child, it was really, really hard, and I didn't expect like the first year or the first 6 months. I don't think I had a real bond with Layla. I think it was quite
mm,
hard because of the working situation and everything else, and then
mm,
what happened to his mum. But now it's obviously completely different. But I find that sometimes like Immi can't handle Layla like even crying for a little while, whereas you know I'm kind of used to that, and it doesn't sort of get into my bones or my body the same way it does Immi. So sometimes I'm like, right, let's just leave her, just let her do her thing. And but Immi can't handle that, so it's like Immi will start sort of getting at me, going, well, do something, distract her, do this. And I'm like, well, we don't always have to do that. We can just let her try and just figure it out for herself. And
yeah.
so sometimes, and I guess my biggest problem is when this happens, it's sort of this debate's happening in front of Layla, and then Layla can hear that, and then for me, that's what really works me up because I'm like, she's sort of can see that it's playing a parent off, one off the other
Mm,
and stuff like that. So but yeah, we do have I think our core styles are the same, but I think there is some different. I think I'm more of the sort of the fun one, and if you want to play and all that, bath times and all that is
yeah.
me. And then if it's
Yeah.
like the comfort and all that other stuff, and I give her emotional support, but I think obviously she, you know, putting her to
Nurtures.
bed, getting her sleep,
Nurtures
nurturing
her.
her is obviously Immi. So, and I think they work quite well. That we do have those
Mm,
two different dynamics.
mm.
But yeah, we do butt heads. Like, have you got any others that you can think of?
No,
There'll be a few.
it's true. I think for
Mm,
me, in my defense, the crying thing I find really triggering. Like it's
mm,
a body response. It's not just, oh, I can't handle her crying. It's like
mm,
my body can't handle it. Like it actually
mm,
works me up. And I think it's really common for a lot of
mm,
women to experience that. And I think it also comes down to I was never taught to regulate my own emotions as a child or as a teen, as a young adult. Like I just did not know what that looked like. And I think that came back to me always going to my mum to calm me down and make me feel better and
mm,
give me reassurance. So I didn't have good emotional regulation when I had a child. And so seeing my kid try to regulate her emotions really triggers me. And I just want to calm her down and I just want to stop it. And I'll do anything to I won't do anything to stop the crying. I usually try not to give in to her
mm,
unless it's obviously something that she needs, like a basic need.
yeah.
But yeah, I find it really triggering. I think that does come down to my own
Mm,
issues with emotional
mm,
regulation, and that's been a bit of a journey for me since Mum died. Is trying to learn to kind of control my emotions better and my reactions to things better. I think that's what it comes down to, is the way I react to things. I can be
mm,
quite reactionary rather than just taking a step back and taking a deep breath. And I think Ben's a bit more of a chilled, laid back kind of guy.
Mm.
mm,
And so we do clash on that. And sometimes I'm like, why can't you just understand that it's just me not being able to regulate my emotions and I'm getting triggered. I'm not having a go at your parenting, whereas he'll get defensive because he feels like I'm having an attack at his parenting, and then we get into a fight about it. And so I think that's what's going on underneath.
Yeah.
It's probably like interesting, I don't know, Ben, like hearing that as well, like from your end. I mean, I'm sure you guys have discussed it before, but like does that like I guess resonate with you in a way? And I know in the heat of the moment, all the noise, all the anger, like it's a lot, right? Like just trying to work through it. But do you feel with time you're starting to see where she's coming from on that one and trying to be less defensive when it does come up, or how's it for you?
Yeah. I think because initially I always felt like it was a bit of an attack at me because she would obviously I'm trying to discipline Layla in my own way. She's not getting in the bath, so sometimes I'm like, right, I'm just going to pick her up and put her in the bath, right?
Yeah.
And if she screams, she screams. So then Immi would start just sort of coming at me, going, try something else, do this, do that. I'm like, Immi, I'm dealing with her. I've already got a screaming child. I don't need a screaming mum at the same time. But I've got to sort of just kind of not retaliate and sort of try and take it on, and then after we'll talk about it, like when we're more calm. But so much better than when we're going after she's in bed. Don't do it in the moment, do it after.
Yep.
So just sort of take it on, put Layla to bed, then we'll go down and watch Love Island, and then we'll talk about it, or something like that, where we're
in a bit more of a better frame of
Still
mind.
get into an argument, but at least it's not in the moment.
it could still escalate.
Yeah.
But one, it's not in front of Layla, which I think is very important, because we don't want her thinking that it's normal for us to be, arguing and things. Obviously, you can have debates and arguments are a normal thing of life, but we would just try and do it away from Layla and just come to an agreement. And we generally do. Sometimes we agree to disagree and then just sort of accept each other's different ways. We've got stuff about screen time and we have slightly different views on that. And
really? Wait, stop there. I want to hear. Tell me, what are your views? I'm curious.
So relaxed for screen time, and it bugs me to no end. I'm so rigid.
Being quite technical, into technology and computing and programming.
Yeah. When I was a child, I was probably a bit different to the norm. Like, I was very sociable. I played football and I exercise and go out with friends. But also at the same time, I loved gaming, and I also loved. When I was 6 or 7, my granddad had an old BBC computer and I sit and program it and all that sort of stuff when I was young.
Wow.
So for me, seeing that Layla do things, on a screen or using a keyboard and stuff like that, or gaming, for me, is not a bad thing because, that's where we're heading in the future. And obviously, Immi's opinion on that is I do limit it. I don't think she should just be doing it all the time, which is not. But I think technology is part of life, and they need to get used to it. And as much as it sounds like they need to, if they're not used to it, they're not really. Going to school and all that, they're starting to use touchscreens and computers and that. Although you can still, I think it's still important to make sure they're doing things with their hands, and they're building things and being creative. But, the future is very much digital. It's just the way it's going. So I think there is a bit of a placebo around it. I keep saying it to Immi, gaming and gamers and all this sort of thing. And there can be a problem with gaming. It can become addictive, right? And I do enjoy it. And it's part of my outlet, actually. So when all this stuff was happening, like me going and playing Warzone or something.
It's his wind down.
It's actually my wind down. It's my getting out of my the real world and just doing something that's. And the same with playing football and stuff. So it's just, for me, it's the same. When I'm playing football, I don't think about anything else but football. When I'm playing games, I don't think about anything else. So we're a bit different with screen time. Immi's a lot more strict than me, and I get it. And we've had conversations, and dinner. We call it. What is it?
TV
dinner is a Friday maybe or something. So it's not all the time. We try and get her to engage when she's eating dinner and not be distracted. We don't just give her a tablet at the dinner table to distract her unless it's we're going on holiday. We're on a plane. Sometimes distraction is just great, right? You have to do it.
Yeah. You know what I think it is? I think women, I'm going to be really generalizing here, but I think women feel a lot more guilt when it comes to their kids sitting and watching TV or sitting on the iPad for too long. But I genuinely don't feel like you get dad guilt. Like, you don't sit there being like, Layla's been on the TV for an hour. Maybe we should
Yeah.
take her outside and do something. Like,
Yeah,
I just don't think it's in your body. Whereas if she's watching too much TV, I come across as a more strict one because I'm going,
Yeah.
I feel like a bad mum. I feel like I'm not playing with her enough. I feel like I'm not,
Yes.
teaching her something or baking cookies like everyone else on Instagram here. So I feel like it always comes back to me feeling not good enough or me feeling judging my parenting, which I just don't think you do.
Yeah. I feel, I get where she's coming from. Like, I do have that level of guilt. If sometimes if I think she's doing something for too long, like watching something or on the tablet, I do have a cutoff point, but Amy's is a lot earlier than mine.
What is your cutoff point?
Yeah.
Maybe 6 hours.
Literally a whole
Maybe half
day.
a day. Depends.
Oh my God.
She's learning. It's educational. She's she's going to be a programmer. Hey, if she's a programmer, she'll be making good coin, let me tell you. So that's actually not such a bad thing.
So that's the thing. And she, like, I don't have, like, I know there's a thing around technology and people worrying about what it's doing to kids and stuff, but I had it at a very young age as well, believe it or not, although it wasn't as, you're not walking around with a mobile phone and stuff like that, but I was on it a lot. So I think I am where I am today doing what I'm doing as a business is because of that. And that was my interest. So if Layla's got an interest in it, I don't have any problem stopping her. But obviously if it's just a stimulation thing and just she wants to be stimulated all the time, then that's a problem. And that's where we've got to, jump in and break that.
Set the boundaries. Love that. I know it's such an interesting journey, isn't it? This parenthood gig, like, from like, footloose and fancy free, living in London, doing your thing, to like next minute, like, having this child and talking about technology and it's like, what just happened? But I mean, look, we love them. It's all part of this beautiful journey. Guys, I want to thank you so much for your time today, and tell me, how can people find out more about you? I'm going to turn it to you, Im, specifically, obviously having your own podcast yourself.
You know what I find, Ben? He's so inactive on social media. It's boring. For someone who's so techie and like got all the devices, he's not a big social media guy. But you can find me on Instagram over at, if you want to check out my podcast, it's over at Good Mourning. So Good Mourning is with a U. And we are Good Mourning Podcast on Instagram. We've got a website, goodmourning.com.au. And or my personal Instagram is Imogen Rose, but I just share pictures of my child. So that's also not very exciting.
I love that. I'll pop those details in the episode notes as well so people can find you. Thank you so much again, guys.
Thank you.